I'm just so grateful to be here. Good morning, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here with y'all today because I've been experiencing a lot of disruption in my life lately. Anybody else kind of feeling the same? Yeah, a lot of disruption going on in the room, right? Namely, one of them is this. This is my daughter. Her name is Madison. She's about 4.5 years old right now. And by the way, she's not the disruption. But when she gets sick, that's the disruption. Anyone have like little ones at home? When they get sick, they turn into devils, like tyrants. Yeah. So she got sick recently, and snot's just dripping down her nose. She's feeling uncomfortable. She's whining. And another disruption that kind of topped up on top of that was this. Anyone know what movie this is? Shout it out. Oh, yeah. You know what's up. Yeah, K-pop Demon Hunters. I thought it would leave my house like months ago. It's still playing. It came out in September of 2025. It won a bunch of awards, and I was like, all right, it'll be a phase. It'll be a phase. It wasn't. And it's so fascinating, right? Maddie, she's sick. We're sitting on the couch. We're watching K-pop Demon Hunters. And a thought crosses my mind. I think to myself, hey, right around September when K-pop came out, right around the same time, OpenAI, the company that founded ChatGPT, they had launched a platform called Sora 2. It's a video generation app. And I look over at Maddie, and I say, hey, Maddie, how would you like to create a video in the form of K-pop Demon Hunters, but with like you, me, and mommy? What would you like to see in that? And a few seconds later, she had this to say.
Mom and Dad one kid and a baby, the dad, and then I want a cat.
Oh, okay. What are they going to talk about?
The outside of the street, talking about the house.
Okay, so they're going to be outside on the street talking about the house?
Yeah, the new house.
Okay, sounds good. Now, we don't have a cat. So I was like, you're not getting one. We do have a dog, though, so I took her exact prompt. I throw it into Sora 2 with a dog instead of a cat, and a few seconds later, this pops out.
Well, here we are. Time to move into our new home.
Can we build a fort?
A fort? We haven't even moved the boxes in yet.
There's always time for a fort.
And in that moment, my daughter had moved from being a consumer of content to a creator of content. At 4 years old, she's able to see herself, Chinese, in the content that she's creating. She sees herself in the books that we read, whether it's about dim sum or learning to read and watch video, like whatever it is, she's able to see herself in that. In that moment, Maddie, at 4.5 years old, she's able to move beyond what's present, the disruption, the sickness, the crankiness, to what's possible, the differentiation. And I can't help but think that if my daughter at 4.5 years old can so seamlessly leverage the latest in technology, how might we do the same? How might we start to leverage the latest in technology for our customers, for our clients, for our team members, to meet them where they're at so that they can see themselves in the work? How will we leverage the latest in technology to bring our best work to life? My name's JQ. I'm probably the only person you'll ever meet who can pronounce his full name in just 2 letters, JQ. Kind of like if Jay-Z and GQ had a baby and it was Asian, that would be me. In case some of you are curious about the last name and where that's from, I'm originally from Singapore. It's a big part of my heritage. Shout out Asian Heritage Month. Really, really glad to be here because, Singapore is a big part of who I am. It's the place of my birth, but Singapore is actually also the place of my first disruption. You see, it was back in the 80s. Any other 80s babies in the room? Yeah, woo! Kai's like, yes, me and you. Just Kai, okay. And it was back in the 80s. I'm about 10 months old. And my aunt, she's babysitting me. She thinks to herself, Jay's a pretty cute baby. So she takes out one of those old school film cameras, the ones with flash on it, and she starts taking photos. Flash, flash, flash. As they get the photos developed, my family, they notice something strange. You see, in every single photo where flash was used, there's a little white dot right on top of my left eye. It's cancer. 7 tumors, to be precise. I'm diagnosed with retinoblastoma. My ophthalmologist rushes in to operate, and before I had turned 1 year old, I was left half blind, a cancer survivor with a prosthetic glass eye. I don't say this for pity, by the way, but I say this because I wonder, at what age do we experience our first disruption? If you're anything like me, change has been a constant in my life as much as it probably has been in yours, and the change didn't stop there, did it? My parents, they were DJs, radio disc jockeys, so we moved a lot. We moved from Singapore to Sri Lanka. We moved 8 times before I was 12 years old, and we ended up finally in what you might recognize right here in beautiful Vancouver, BC. But I liked change so much that I decided to make a career out of it. I found myself in the world of change and innovation, where a few stats for you, you might find this really fascinating. Every single year, regardless of what organization you're in, right, at a macro scale, we spend about $2.6 trillion, according to IDC, on what we call innovation and transformations. And for the past 3 decades, nothing about change has actually changed. The stats are actually still the same. 2 in 3 organization transformations fail. You heard Chris talking about how you're trying this new initiative with the EDI Council, and then it starts and stops, and there's all this friction there. And I couldn't help but think, with AI coming around over the past few years in full blast, has anything changed there? Has AI made change easier? And according to this report by BCG of last year, 74% of organizations are still failing to scale value with AI. And that's where we became really curious. So my business partner and I, Rich, we started the Change Fluency Co. We've helped about 50,000 leaders navigate and learn to speak change as if it's a language. And what we found and realized is that we have the latest technology right at our fingertips. Pop open your cell phone or your laptop right now, and you'll have Claude and GPT and Grok and Gem, all of the things, right? And yet, most people think that we move at the speed of technology, but we don't. We don't. Most people think that we move at the speed of technology, but the truth is that we don't. We actually move at the speed of the enterprise. We move at the speed of people, which means that we don't have an innovation problem or a technology problem. We actually have a change problem. As you think about all the EDI initiatives that we're trying to drive forward, as we're trying to design future and inclusive workspaces, it's not going to be a tech thing. It's going to be a people thing. But what if we reframed that? What if instead of being an innovation problem or a change problem, we saw it instead as a change opportunity? Because there is a small subset, check it out, 4%, you can't see it because it's blocked out, but 4% of organizations have figured out how to do it. They've figured out how to combine human and AI together in their workforce. And for the ones who have, oh, thank you for taking off the captions. For the ones who have, here are the results. Higher shareholder returns, higher revenue, more innovation through patents. Most importantly, for this room in particular, I think you'd all be really curious and fascinated by the last stat. 1.4x higher employee satisfaction? What? That's great. Go ahead and shout it out. Why do you think, for the 4% of organizations who figured it out, why do you think that if if I figured out human and AI at my workforce, I'm going to be more satisfied as an employee. What do you think? More time? Yep. What else? Lots of time. More time. Why would I be satisfied? Less things that we don't want to do. Yes. What else? Productivity. Creativity. Yeah. Totally. What was that? Ooh, yeah. Flexibility. Maybe in my day I can do, go for a walk more or something like that. Oh, yeah. Did y'all hear that? We're speaking the same language, us and our digital coworkers and our team members. Well, we found that there's one thing in common with this 4% of organizations. One thing. They all had one thing in common, and that had to do with their relationship with this word, disruption. It all had to do with their mindsets around disruption. So let's make this real for you. We're going to go over to Slido. Thank you so much, AV team. We're going to swap over. I just invite you to answer the question here. What disruptions are we actually facing in the room today? What are the change stuff that we're wrestling with? What are the challenges that you're facing today? What does that look like? Economic uncertainty. Yeah, definitely. Post-secondary crisis. We talked a lot about this morning. Generational expectations in the workforce. Layoffs. Political and social climate. Yep. Layoffs is coming in loud and strong right now. Kids. Yep, okay. Divisive politics. Polarization. Inflexibility. Either with yourself or with your team members, perhaps. Backlash against EDI, job security, low engagement. Thank you for answering all of this. Growing changes, right? So a lot of change to manage. Scaling the organization. Staff retiring. Y'all are dealing with a lot. You're like, dang, it's a lot of change. Let's go back to the deck. It's so interesting. So keep whatever disruption you're facing today, and thank you for all of your answers. Keep that in mind. I would invite you to explore where you think your change mindset is in the next few minutes, but also where you think your team's change mindset is. So what we found, right, we pulled a bunch of leaders, and we said, hey, how do you wrestle with change? And it boiled down to two different factors. Number one, what's my change interpretation? Meaning, do I see change as a threat or as an opportunity? And what's my change response? So am I frozen, resistant, stuck, or am I proactive and adaptive with the change? And depending on where you fall within this 2x2, you come with one of four change mindsets. You see, if I see change as an opportunity, but I'm frozen, resistant, stuck, I find myself in what they call the observer state. Kind of like that meme with the dog and the house burning down, right? It's like, there is a lot going on right now. Yeah, this is fine. I'm going to wait and see how things play out, and then I'll make the change. We see this all the time in AI. Hey, I'm going to wait till it matures a little bit, and then I'll adopt it. If I see change as a threat, but I'm frozen, resistant, stuck, I fall into what we call the defender state. My clicker, can we click through? Awesome, thank you. We fall into what we call the defender state. Kind of like Jon Snow, Game of Thrones. Any fans in the room? Oh, wow, strong fan. Really like Jon Snow, huh? Okay. Jon Snow, right? Like, we built this wall, so we're going to protect it. We're going to defend it. What this looks like as we build out EDI practices is, oh, wait, what do you mean we're building out a new policy? What do you mean we're building out a new product or toolkit? I just spent the last 5-10 years building my own thing. And you want to change it? You start to see defense mechanisms pop up. If I see change as a threat, but I'm adaptive to it, here's where things get really interesting. We find ourselves in the saboteur state. Kind of like this guy. Does anyone know who this is? Shout it out. It's from Toy Story. Yes, who said that? Yell it out again. No? Okay. He's like, I don't want to yell it out again. It's Stinky Pete. Stinky Pete the prospector. These are the people within our organizations who are smiling at you, and they're like, oh, wow, you have this new EDI initiative? Oh, that's great. And then they turn to the person next to them, and they're like, that's nice. Right? Or or even worse, they're proactively working against it. How do we start to identify where our teams are at? And then last but not least, if I see change as an opportunity, but I'm adaptive to it, I fall into the fluent state. I'm the Mr. Miyagi in the room, right? I get thrown a punch, and I transform that punch into forward momentum. So step one, naturally, is how do we identify where our change mindset is, or where our teams are at with our initiative that we're trying to drive forward? And then how do we start to define change fluency in the first place? And then simply put, it's this. It's an individual's adaptive capacity to translate challenges into opportunities. Notice that it's an individual capacity, not an organizational one. Change for us, same with it as EDI initiatives, these are personally deep for us, right? And so where we move the needle is when we can make it personally resonant with the person in front of us too. What's interesting, though, is as we did our research, we found that everybody likes to classify themselves as change fluent, but they immediately can pinpoint their team members as not being so. And the truth is that we are not any one of the four. Psychology has been brought up a lot this morning. We are deeply complex as humans. And what that means is we are not any one of these four, but instead, on a daily basis, we ping pong across all four constantly. So our invitation then is, how do we reinforce or practice change fluency? How do we keep ourselves in that mindset? And there are three really quick ways that you can do that. Number one, how do we discover what's possible? That's the practice of strategic foresight. Number two, that's designing the future. How do we apply design thinking to EDI? And number three, how do we differentiate from the standard? Meaning, how do we care? I love that y'all brought up care earlier on, because it's such a resonant idea. Number one, how do we discover what's possible? Tactically, it's this. How do we tug harder on the threads that we're curious about? What do I mean by that? Well, within strategic foresight, futurists often start to say, hey, what are the shifts we're seeing in society, and then how do we apply that to us? So, for example, signal number one might be this. Search has shifted from information to insight. What do I mean by that? A few years ago, if I wanted to search anything up, I would have pulled up something on Google and gotten 10 million search results. Now, instead, I pull up an app like Perplexity. I want to say, hey, the stock market crashed last week. What's a good value stock for me to buy? And a few seconds later, it pulls on live earnings calls and reports and stock market data and gives me 5 recommendations based on live, real-time analysis. Search has shifted from information to insight. So if that's the case at a societal level, within our initiatives as we try to design inclusive and accessible workplaces, then how are we leveraging AI to power our insights by the second? What are the stories that we can start to draw out about how EDI is working, or how we've just done our practical inventory, to Kai's point? Signal number 2 is this. AI agents are reimagining our workforce. How do we start to lean into that to draw out and make work accessible to anybody, regardless of who they are, to meet them where they're at in the moment? This, then, as AI agents come to mind and we start to see this play out, starts to beg the question as we pull on that thread just a little bit harder. We say, okay, well, what skills are required to shape the future of work? And we had the panel share all of them. Luckily, I built this deck a few days ago. I'm curious to see how many matched up. But as I was thinking about this, I couldn't help but see what Wealth Simple was doing from a hiring practice standpoint. I was talking to Faisal earlier. He's one of the mentees and the leaders of Tomorrow program, and he's like, oh man, I'm building, right? But I don't have the experience because I'm just about to graduate. And Faisal, thanks so much for sharing that. As I saw this with Wealth Simple, they don't care about your university degree. They want to know that you can build. How are we starting to draw out that within the talent of tomorrow to say, hey, If you can show us that you can do it, we'll hire you in a split second. How are we nurturing that within our organizations? And so, we talked about the skill sets. Here was my best guess. We'll see if we nailed it. TJ's smiling. He's like, yes, curiosity. Creative solutioning, right? Clear delegation, critical. I think y'all killed it, right? You did really well. One I would add is, we talked a lot about process. I think Megan from KPMG was mentioning that. How do we start to discover what's possible by scanning outside of EDI to then draw trends into EDI? Number 2, how do we design the future? Well, that really tactically is asking ourselves, how do we integrate our innovative ideas that we do see within our own context? Because we see innovative ideas all the time. I doom scroll. I don't know anybody else that does that, but I doom scroll all the time, mostly in the washroom, right? And I'm like, I'm spending way too much time here. But there's so many great ideas that are coming out of that. How do I say, hey, how do I apply this to my own organization? So, for example, you can't see the top, but if we can take off cap, thank you. You're all on top of things today. Project coordinator. So I wanted to build an agent. Copilot has gotten just so good in the last 2 months. And so within designing the future, I saw a bunch of agents being built. And I'm really proactive and a bit ADD, right? A little bit neurodivergent, and I'm always on the go. I'm always distracted. And so I thought, how could I have AI meet me where I am? Because I have a lot of great ideas while I'm walking the dog. So I built myself an AI agent that in Teams, it's a little bit small, but I can now chat with an AI agent that says, hey, show me my tasks for the week. It pulls on a SharePoint list that's live and up to date, and it's managing it. You can see all the tasks that I had last week that I was working through. And then I might say something like, okay, well, I want to add or create a task. How do I do that? And it'll say, okay, what's the task? And it'll manage and update my work as I'm walking my dog. It's meeting me where I'm at. Not only that, it instantly, after I've created the task, I enter that, I say, hey, I want to book a reservation for Chicago. A few seconds later, SharePoint Online has emailed me so I can keep track of my work, the work in front of me. And once I'm done the work, of course, maybe I'm still walking Brooklyn. I really like walking my dog, apparently. It can then update the task for me. How do we start to meet our workforce where they're at? Regardless of where their mindset is, right? Regardless of how they like to work. Maybe they like to dictate. How do we integrate all of that into our work? This is just one example, but I believe that AI agents provide us with infinite leverage, especially when it comes to designing inclusive, accessible workforces. The number one question that I usually get, if we could grab the caption off for a second, is how do I start with AI? And we don't have time today to unpack this, but here's this roadmap that we usually go through. If you want to scan the QR code, it might be a little small, so this is the bigger one. This just leads to my email. So if you want to just send me an email, I'll just reply and give you the 5-step toolkit to say, hey, how do I play with AI agents very tactically come Monday to start to build out and meet my workforce where they're at. So I'll give you a few seconds there. If we've discovered what's possible, if we've designed the future, how do we differentiate from the standard? How do we differentiate from today and tomorrow? And I would say tactically, it's this. Curate, connect, and create everything with care. Do y'all remember the last time you were seen? Like really seen? I don't know if any of you know him. His name's Eugene Fung. He's pretty active in the HR community here in BC. He reached out to me about a year ago. He said, hey, can we grab coffee? I had really talked to him in passing, and Eugene says, yeah, let's meet up for coffee. I would love that. We're in Yaletown at the Starbucks. I walk in, and the first moment I remember being seen so strongly, it happened about a year ago, was when he asked this very simple question to me. He said, hey, so good to see you. Glad we could meet up for coffee. Jay, would you prefer that I sit on your left-hand side or your right-hand side? Nobody's asked me that before. I'm half blind. I can't see on this side. I always prefer someone to be sitting on my right-hand side. This wasn't in the policy. And I know a lot of people are talking about how EDI has been struggling over the past year, but EDI doesn't live in a policy. It actually lives, it doesn't live in the macro, it lives in the micro. EDI actually lives in the moment, right? And so when I say, when was the last time you're seen, how do we start to intentionally just notice and observe the people in front of us? Because I'll be honest, Eugene, that happened 6, 12 months ago. It's still one of the strongest moments I've had for someone to acknowledge me and my half-blindness. As we wrap up, and we'll shift into Q&A with Giselle in a second here, I want to share just one really quick last story. There's a man throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s. His name was Roger Cool. He was a DJ in Singapore. His moniker, Roger Cool, he had a jingle that went with it. It went, Roger Cool on the radio. If you were a pop star or a pop band going through Singapore throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you would have been interviewed by Roger. Tony Braxton, the Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears. One of the reasons that Roger was so famous was not only was he a great DJ, Roger was also blind. And at one point, he gets into the booth with none other than Stevie Wonder, who, as you know, is also blind. And Roger says to Stevie, he can't contain his excitement. He says, oh my gosh, Stevie, very rarely do I get to go into the booth with another blind dude. Can I share something with you? And Stevie says, oh yeah, sure, hit me, Roger. That's my terrible Stevie impression, by the way. But Roger says, you know, Stevie, there are many things that are impossible for a blind person. You can't drive, and you can't become a surgeon. But for everything else is possible. What do you think about that? And Stevie ponders that for a brief second. He hums and haws. He reaches into his jacket pocket, and he pulls out his harmonica. He blows a few notes. And he says, yeah, you're right, Roger. There are many things that are impossible for us as blind folks. We can't drive, we can't become surgeons, but I believe you're right. Everything else is possible. Because if you didn't do what you did with your microphone, and I didn't do what I do with my harmonica or my piano or my mic, we wouldn't have my music or your DJing. We wouldn't have blind DJs and blind musicians. And I think it's up to us to leverage the latest in technology, the latest in what we have accessible to us to bring our best work to life. And with that, he takes his harmonica and he passes it to Roger. This harmonica, Roger Cool was his moniker, but his last name was Kiew. Roger was my father. Yeah. And my dad passed away about 20 years ago now. But one of the reasons why I do what I do is because I think the message is still the same. Whether it's a harmonica or AI, whether it's microphone or the latest in technology, how do we leverage what we have right in front of us to bring our best work to life? How do we start to become change fluent with whatever it is, from discovering what's possible to designing the future to differentiating from the standard? You see, most people can sit in this notion that change happens to us, but the right-hand side is all about how change happens through us. The bottom of the grid shows how this, if I'm in a victim mindset or questioning mindset, I might say, hey, why is this happening to me? And the truth is that the top focuses on, why is this happening for me? You see, most people design today and wait for the disruption to hit tomorrow. But I invite us to disrupt today as you design tomorrow. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jay. I have no words. Thank you for sharing that story and being so vulnerable with us today. That was wonderful. Thank you. Let's keep the conversation going. I'd like to welcome Giselle Blackman, co-chair of the Diversity Inclusion Leadership Council, to join on stage for some join Jay on stage for some Q&A. Please join me in welcoming Giselle. Over to you.
Thank you. Am I on? Can you hear me? Oh my goodness, wow. Where does one start with that? Holy Hannah, I will say that what you shared today was so inspirational because I think sometimes we come in thinking that we have all the answers and we don't. But the thing that stuck with me the most, Jay, was how do we overcome our fear of that disruption, of the change that's happening within us? Because I think sometimes we are our own obstacles to even seeing how we hold ourselves back.
Yeah. There's definitely this element of courage, right, that's required, but also facing the fear, right? So much of the time, I didn't share this in the past, or in the last half an hour, but on March 3rd, 2023, I actually got an email from my endocrinologist, and it said, Jay, we found a tumor in your pituitary gland. And right in that moment, that millimeter tumor felt like this million-pound mountain. And then I made the mistake of asking ChatGPT.
Oh no.
And I was like, oh no, I'm gonna die. And it bubbled, right? And how often do we catastrophize the unknown? But the truth was, you know, I'm so glad Laura had mentioned talking to her therapist.
Yes.
Because the more I dug into the fear of the unknown, the more I realized that the percentage was actually really small. And you know, I got 2 little kids at home, right? I was like, oh, these girls are gonna end up without a father, and blah, blah, blah. And the truth is that like 0.5% of people with my tumor, it's benign by the way, I'm okay, do die. But the percentage, I could choose to focus on that, or I could double down on the rest of the stats. And so by exploring the fear even deeper, sitting with it, sitting with the anxiety, and then realizing it's actually not that bad, I can then shape what's possible.
Oh, that's amazing. I love the concept of insatiable curiosity because I think it's a theme that's been running throughout today's session, and you've hit on that as well. What I'd like to pivot to, though, is how do we help organizations accept that where they think they are is not where they really are as we embark on this journey of change and disruption?
There's future casting as a concept, you know, and I love that you said where we think we are versus where we actually are. And there's this really simple design thinking exercise that anyone can do that kind of sheds light on where you actually are.
Okay.
And it's very simply put, like building a little bit on what Kai had shared, it's this notion of like, hey, if today is a 5-star experience, kind of like Airbnb or Uber, right? 5-star is like just good enough. Like you took an Uber to the airport and you didn't die. That's like a 5-star experience, you know? That's current state, that's status quo. How do we now start to ask our teams, hey, if current state is 5 stars, what would a 6-star experience look like? What would an incremental 6-star experience look like for EDI? Yes. Or making people feel included? And then keep on nudging them, say, okay, well, if that's a 6-star, what's a 7-star? What's an 8-star? It's a great exercise that we can do with our teams to imagine what's possible, but not have the negatives of like, oh, well, we didn't do what we said we were gonna do last year, so maybe we failed. You're actually focusing on what you can create or co-contribute towards.
Wow.
I was
that's
listening,
incredible.
Kai.
Yeah. I think the other thing that you've touched on here is the concept of pulling on that thread. You talked about pulling on the thread that's out there to be more curious about that. Is there a way for us to continue doing that without getting frustrated? Because there is a lot of change that's happening everywhere. How do we keep the momentum? How do we keep that concept of being open to the fact that it's not going to be perfect? It's progress over progression.
Yeah.
Progress over perfection, sorry. But how do we keep that momentum going forward? What would be your recommendation?
I think similar to what the story with Eugene I shared, you know, about how he had just seen me in that
Eugene,
moment.
by the way. He's
oh,
amazing.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
Everyone shout out Eugene if you know him. Because I didn't tell him I was going to tell this story. I should have. But there's this notion of like, rather than making EDI like a separate silo, and I think you and I were talking about that this morning, rather than making it a silo of something that we do, how do we make it something that we just practice? Right, kind of like reps or walking the dog or, you know, everything, so small acts where we're embedding these into our conversations to say like, oh wait, hey, I didn't notice the the inclusive bathrooms. Can we get on that? Does anyone else notice? Right, like it's this intentional drawing out of that.
And I think it also feeds into the concept of allowing the person to know that they're being seen. Just by asking the question, say, okay, what do you need? What is it you want? And I think oftentimes we're afraid to ask because we don't want to embarrass.
Yeah.
So how do we overcome that hurdle to allow folks to know that it's okay to be curious? It's okay to ask from a point of not really knowing.
I think now more than ever before, we need moments over momentum.
Okay.
We move so quickly, amen? Right, like I feel like now more than ever, how do we slow down to speed up?
How do you say that again? Moments
Over momentum.
Okay.
Like we all want the momentum, right? Like,
Yes.
hey, I was going so fast, let me run to catch up.
Yes.
Right, but like how do we slow down in those moments?
Yes.
Just this morning, Faisal and I were chatting and you know, we were talking about like, hey, where are you from? And I could tell this like, as we were having the conversation, there's this like wanting to jump to like the next thing. And he was like, oh, you know, I'm from Jordan. And I could have easily like just kept going and like jumped to a new thread in the conversation. But I'm like, oh, wow, you're from Jordan? Like, what's that like? You know? So like, how do we slow down in the moment to meet the person where they're at?
I find that fascinating because one of my profs just recently had said to me, sometimes you need to slow down to speed up. So it echoes that sentiment as well. But as leaders here, we often think that we need to know or have the answers. We often believe that if we don't show up with the full slate of here's the process or here's what needs to be done, we look either incompetent or we look as if we don't know what we're doing in front of the people that we're set to lead.
Yeah.
How do we as leaders overcome that given everything that you shared so far?
Who had mentioned, I think, Kristen, empathy being one of the core skills.
Yes.
There's this notion of like, how do we actually sit in the shoes of the person who we're trying to serve, right? And that's actually really hard to do unless you're facing exactly what they're wrestling with, you know? And so meeting with them where they're at and then asking this one question, this one question is not mine, by the way, but there's this connection expert here in Vancouver. His name's Riaz Megji. Shout out to Riaz. He asks this really great question to allow people to dive deeper into empathy. And that single question is this: what's that like? What's that like? So someone shares something with you. It's like, oh, you know, I've been really struggling with my initiative that I'm trying to blah, blah, blah. And instead of like doing anything or trying to put the weight on you to have the answer, be like, oh, wow, you're wrestling with that? What's that like? And I love Riaz's question, because it allows you to just sit in where they're sitting.
Okay, excellent. I don't want to monopolize the time, so
Yeah.
I'm going to turn over to Slido right now to see if the audience would like to perhaps weigh in with their questions. I'll just turn over. Ooh, we've got a few already. Okay, the first question here. What's one widely accepted leadership practice you think actually slows down innovation and adaptability?
I'm so scared to answer this. Because my answer is strategic planning. Strategic planning. If I could, I would just rip it up. So I used to lead, I was a head of strategy over at TELUS Health's digital virtual care arm on the B2B side. And we did strategic planning all the time. And one of the things that I kept on pushing for was how do we drive towards, instead of strategic planning that's a year out, 18 months out, 1, 3, 5 years, how do we actually do strategic sprints instead? Greatest example of it right now in the market, Anthropic and Claude. If you listen to any of their design product teams talking about how they build, they have no idea what they're doing, which is a great thing because they live in the chaos.
Okay.
They're shipping features like what, every week? So Jenny, the head of design at Anthropic, she was on a podcast and she said, oh yeah, we just let our users tell us what we build. And then we build it and we ship it. And we kind of talk about in passing conversations, is that a good idea? They're like, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. The data's showing that that's a pretty good idea. And a week later, they build Cowork or Claude in Excel or Claude in Outlook. And it's transforming how we're working. How do we do the same thing with EDI initiatives? Right, where it's not like, hey, for the next 18 months, here's like the one thing we're gonna do, right? Can we do something within like the next week or 2 weeks that's like a light, quick win and then reevaluate? How do we move quickly?
I wonder if the whole concept of fear holds us back still, because I think many of us may work in regulatory environments where there are rules that we need to adhere to or systems that we need to check off to as part of our processes. I think sometimes we try to fit EDI into those boxes.
Yeah.
And it's probably not an easy fit. It's a little bit too snug because if it's going to adapt, it's not going to adapt to the regulatory environment that is very rigid. So thank you. Our next question. How do we ensure AI expands human potential and opportunity rather than reinforcing inequities or reducing meaningful work?
I believe that, and I'm biased, but if I can leverage artificial intelligence to bring my best work to life, that actually means a lot of creation.
Yes.
It means a lot of creativity. And so now more than ever before, I think the inequities are less present because acknowledging the bias in AI models, you can get access to the latest technology for $25 a month. It's never been cheaper to get access to the latest technology, right? And so how do we leverage what we do have to, sorry, I just saw the question up.
That's hilarious.
I got distracted. I was like, what's my dog's name? Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Well, that has a lot more traction right now, so we'll go to that question.
Yeah.
What's your dog's name, and what's your favorite musical memory?
My dog's name is Brooklyn. He's a Shiba Inu. Absolute pain in my ass. If anyone knows Shibas, they're stubborn, but I love them to death. And favorite musical memory is, wow, that's a personal question. It was in November of last year, meeting Andrew McMahon of Jack's Mannequin in person. And so he fought with leukemia and plays piano rock, and I'd often looked up to him as this person who not only led his life through creativity, but also gave back to like what he was wrestling with, because he faced leukemia as a younger adult. And so getting to meet him in person, and that was really cool. So whoever asked that question, like, thank you. That was a really cool ask.
Now, as we move through this concept of cross-functional as well as cross-generational work environments where we're trying to leverage the strength of each generation, how do we apply this concept of disruption and be more aware of it to see how we can actually leverage and bring these groups together more effectively? Any suggestions?
I think about what I think Laura had said about looking at the education system. And it's interesting, right? Like if I was to rebuild the education system from scratch, I don't know if I would want my kids to attend university today. And today, like I don't know if it's necessary for my daughter at 4 years old to attend uni. What do I mean by that as I extrapolate that to us in this conversation?
Yes.
There's this notion of like, how do we start from scratch? Because there's a lot of predetermined assumptions about how we should do EDI well, how we do inclusion, how we approach psychological safety, right? If I was to do things from scratch, knowing what we do today, how would we rebuild it? I think that'll create a lot of conversations that would be net new that might bring some new ideas into the fold.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, let's go to this little fun diddle here. How can we ethically integrate AI when it often contradicts our EDI goals, such as environmental impacts, biases, and
Extractive.
extractive processes?
Don't use AI for AI's sake, right? It's everyone has for the last year just been like seeing it as the hammer,
Yes.
right? Just saying, hey, let's throw AI at everything.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that. Like I'm a huge proponent of artificial intelligence and leveraging it, but I don't think we need to do it for everything. Like don't draft your emails in Outlook. Like you can write your own emails, but where it really moves the dial, where actions are taken on your behalf, why don't we lean into that, where it's productivity focused and efficiency focused, right? So that we are reducing the impact on environment and promoting sustainability while we're at it.
For sure. I know a lot of folks talk about the fact that AI is such a huge proponent of progress. However, I wonder what it does to the human condition about connection. So many of us forget that AI is supposed to be a tool, not the sole purpose of how we go about work. So how do we maintain connection yet still leverage tools of AI to assist us?
Yeah, I think we're all doing a great job being here today, for one, right? Because I think in-person events aren't going to go away. The ability to carve out time where we can spend with the person in front of us, like I love this, right? But I think that extends to our teams too. How are we just finding time to connect with our teams and do walks? I actually miss, this is going to sound weird, but I miss the pandemic where we would go for walks with my team virtually. And that was our ability to still connect, right? But on a deeper level, at a slower level. And so I think that as the pandemic eased up,
Yes.
I actually fell right back into back-to-back meetings.
Yeah.
And so fighting that is like, as leaders, I think there's this intentionality that we can apply.
How do we slow it down?
Build buffer.
What do you mean by that?
We're all trying to run at 120% capacity right now. How do we run at 80? Like, what's the challenge? Can I leverage AI to the point where I'm actually working 80% of the time instead, so that I have the 20% to dive deeper into connection, right? So building buffer means like the larger blocks in our calendar where it's used for either deep thinking or walking the halls or connecting with our people.
And you ask people not to block over meetings where they are like, oh, I already have something, and somebody else already blocks into the meeting on top of that. What do you mean? That was my break time. I know what that feeling is because there are other people who have access to your calendars, but I think at the end of the day, if you had to leave our audience with a nugget of how to start being more intentional about how we start this process, what would that nugget be?
That's a really great question. When I think about the one core nugget, there's so much pressure behind that question, by the way. Oh, geez. I would say like apply and build as you go and tinker, right? Like one of the biggest things that AI is giving us the power to do is design the life and work styles that we want because we have more time, hypothetically, right? So now is the time to practice and play with like, oh, what do I want to spend my time doing? Do I want to spend my time with more one-on-one meetings, more lunches, more coffees? In order for us to do that, how do we now start to design and then work towards that?
Okay, so come up with a plan.
A plan, priority, yeah, you got it. You got it.
For sure.
Yeah.
I will take one more question here. Let's go to this one here. How do leaders balance urgency for transformation with the very real change fatigue many teams are experiencing right now?
Change fatigue comes from one thing.
What's that?
It's this notion that change is happening to me,
Okay.
right? Like when I showed it on the grid, right?
Yes.
If I feel fatigued about change, it means that they don't feel like they have agency over what is happening.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it's like, oh, here's this thing that you need to do, go do it. Of course I'm gonna feel like it's a lot because I'm like, okay, here's 5 other change initiatives that we're doing this year, right? So how do we balance the urgency for that is through compelling storytelling, right? How do we find the tie-in to make the mission personal with the person who is working on our teams? Because if I can make it personal and I feel like I'm resonant with what we're doing, I'm not gonna feel the change fatigue as much because I feel like I have agency in moving forward.
The challenge sometimes is that we work with or for leaders who are always on to their next. So this may not always be a case of dealing with our teams that report into us. It may be how do we report up and manage those relationships up. Any nuggets for that sort of construct?
Yeah, ask the question. Ask the question like, hey, I know we're dealing with a lot of urgent things that are coming up, but are we wrestling today with the tyranny of the urgent? What do I mean by that? The tyranny of the urgent is because another fire has come up, because a client ask has come up, because something's hit the news, we're all gonna like hone in on that one thing. Hey, like, can we slow down? Are we wrestling with the tyranny of the urgent today? And if so, how do we slow down as we reprioritize what's most important?
Jay, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. I have truly enjoyed getting to know you, and I've truly enjoyed your presentation today. So thank you very much on behalf of everyone here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Giselle.